Best albums of 2010s is a difficult list to make, like most of these lists. This list is basically alphabetical. It's not in any order, because if I were going to rank these, it would take another 10 years. The first one is an act I'll bet you may not have heard of. Australian DJ trio called the Avalanches. Their second album, Wildflower, took 15 years to make. Why does it take so long? Two reasons. They create these amazing tapestries of albums out of samples. Unlike their first record, this one actually has a couple of guest vocalists on it, but the way that they mesh the samples together and create songs and an album arc out of them is just amazing, and yes, it takes 15 years. Beyoncé, both albums I would give it to. I would give it to her self-titled album from 2013 and Lemonade. Most people bow down for Lemonade. I actually think song for song, the self-titled album is better. But when you've got Formation and Sorry on a single album, that's enough to make it great. Those are two very difficult albums for her to equal. And based on the last two albums she's put out, she's not close to getting there just yet. Another favorite, actually from this year, Charli XCX, her semi-self-titled Charli album. She's one of the greatest songwriters, most successful songwriters of the last 10 years. She co-wrote I Love It by Icona Pop. She co-wrote Señorita by Camila Cabello and Shawn Mendes. But she's written a lot of great songs on her own. And over the last 5 years, it was like she did everything except make a proper third album. She dropped mixtapes, she dropped all these singles, she went on tour with Taylor Swift, she was playing all these club gigs. Lo and behold, this year arrives exactly the album that fans, including me, had been hoping for. It's this amazing balance of commerciality and really adventurous pop. Anyone who was a fan of Robyn's Body Talk album, it's sort of like this one picks up the mantle. Another one is Robyn's Body Talk album. The Pitchfork crowd called the kind of music that Robyn and Charli XCX make intellepop, which is really insulting because it implies that pop music can't be intelligent, and some of it really isn't. But it's the kind of pop that a music snob would love and respect, and it's sort of, you hear it in Taylor Swift's 1989, and her last couple of records as well. It's really sophisticated pop music. You could say that it's got an origin in the Beatles, in ABBA, in pop music that actually stimulates the brain and is musically sophisticated with, you know, time signature changes and key changes and lots of things like that. So, another album from this decade, D'Angelo, Black Messiah. This is another one that took 15 years to make the follow-up. But during that time, he was making another great visionary funk album. And it's the kind of album that you can like really sort of dig into. And even though it sounds organic and spontaneous, there's a lot in there that reveals the amount of thought that went in it and a lot of the multi-layered arrangements and the deepness of the production. Another album in the top 10, Lana Del Rey's Born to Die Paradise Edition album. And the reason I'm that specific is because the Paradise Edition has the song Ride on it, which was produced by Rick Rubin and I think is one of her best songs. People tend to overlook the fact that she's a really, really prolific artist. She puts out an album almost every single year. She's underrated as an artist and as a musician. The reason that Born to Die is on this list is it's really the album where her brand made its mark. So I think she's one of the most interesting artists to come along in the last 10 years. Born to Die, in a lot of ways, is the definitive album. Also, Kendrick Lamar, I would give it to two albums. I would give it to his debut full-length, 2012 Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, as great a debut album as you will hear anywhere. It's an ode to his hometown of Compton. It's intelligent without being too brainy. It's street without being violent. You get the feeling that he's a very reasonable person who cares about the world, and he's good for hip-hop in general because anyone who's saying the things that he's saying, challenging in the ways that he's challenging, both lyrically and musically. He followed this album with an album that is based in jazz music. Nobody was doing that in hip-hop. And he followed that album with Damn, which I would also give Best of the Decade to. It's a distillation of everything he did before, but at the same time, it goes off into these really weird, adventurous places. Another great album of the decade, Frank Ocean. Sort of torn between whether it's his Nostalgia Ultra album from 2013 or the Blonde album from 2016. Frank Ocean has been just as influential for who he is as an artist as he is as a musician. What I mean by that is he just doesn't care. He put out 2 albums in 1 week in 2016 as a way of getting out of his record deal. You know, I think he released 3 songs in a month or 2 months not long ago, and then he won't release anything for months. But he's one of the most important and influential R&B singers and musicians of the last 10 years. Closing this out, the final 2, The Weeknd, House of Balloons, 2011. It was a free mixtape that sort of wafted across the internet and completely changed R&B. He used some very unusual samples, things like Susie and the Banshees, who were a late period punk band. It was also much more depressive than R&B had been in the past, and look at the genre it's created. You can't even count all the musicians who have been influenced by it, a lot of these sad R&B guys. And also, nobody knew who he was. He was just like this friend of Drake's from Ontario, and there was like 1 photo of him. And he completely changed his tune, like 2 years later. He embraced his inner superstar and started singing about sex instead of being depressed. He made his mark with House of Balloons. And finally, reluctantly, the 10th most influential album of the decade to Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. It was the last album of that initial great run of great Kanye records. I think on Runaway, where you've got the mixture of the single piano notes, that hard driving beat, and the vocal sample, I mean, who else would have thought to put those 3 things together as effectively as he did? Kanye is a musical genius, as he will not hesitate to tell you, and he completely changed direction with his next album, which was Yeezus, which might have made the list in terms of most influential for me anyway, but it's a really hard and sometimes difficult to listen to album. Again, I think he's one of the greatest musical geniuses of this short millennium so far, but he's, you know, gone somewhere else, both musically and otherwise. So it's a little reluctantly that I give him that. And what better place to end?